Take a look at this map. All of the countries in red are experiencing a debt crisis, where debt payments undermines a country's economy or its ability to protect the basic economic and social rights of its citizens. And it's no coincidence that most of these countries are in the global south. These are predominantly former colonies whose resources were exploited to enrich Western powers. Here's the issue with debt crisis. Paying off debt or even canceling it isn't like a game, something with a start and a finish. The closer a country gets to resolving its debt through repayment or cancellation, the deeper in debt it ends up. Think of it as a cycle, or even a hole. It's a trap, an insidious debt trap, and it can be categorized into two distinct types, each designed to ensnare countries in different ways, but all with the same goal: financial dependency and exploitation. That's why today, around 50 global south countries are in debt crisis, totaling over $1 trillion, and that doesn't even account for interest payments.
It's about power and how power shows up in the debt system in deeply unequal terms.
So how do these debt traps work, and how did the cycle begin? Crippling debt is a legacy of colonialism. In practice, colonialism is when,
violent occupation and oppression of peoples and land and cultures and knowledge systems, and the exploitation and extraction of wealth and resources out of colonized countries for the benefit of European colonizers.
There are two waves of colonialism. The first one began at the turn of the 16th century, when Europe started to conquer the Americas to exploit its resources and people for the wealth of its elites. Here's where the first type of debt cycle begins. Let's look at Haiti, then known as Saint-Domingue, for example. In 1697, France gained control of the western part of the island of Hispaniola and transformed it into the world's most profitable colony by brutally exploiting the unpaid labor of enslaved Africans. By the late 1700s, Haiti's approximately 8,000 plantations produced around 60% of Europe's coffee and about 40% of its sugar. Fast forward to 1804. Haiti had secured its independence through a slave rebellion that ended French rule. Now, you might expect France to initiate some sort of reckoning or reparations for over a century of theft and plunder of Haiti, because this was the revolutionary France that had overthrown and beheaded its own king and had proclaimed liberty, equality, and fraternity. But that's not what happened. Those principles did not apply to its slave colony. When France was finally pressured to decolonize, it did not leave Haiti with a fresh start. Instead, Haiti's independence came at a steep price, and that price was not just blood, but debt, tons of it. In 1825, France agreed to recognize Haiti's independence only if it paid 150 million francs for the loss of enslaved people France considered to be property. This became known as the independence debt, which King Charles X demanded to be paid in 5 annual installments of 30 million francs. And Haiti had no other choice. It was under the threat of economic blockade, another military invasion, and the reinstitution of slavery. But how could this newly independent country with a fragile economy pay such an enormous debt? It couldn't, and that was the objective. According to one record, that year's first installment was 6 times Haiti's income that year. But here's another catch. Haiti had to take out a loan from French banks to make the first reparations payment. This became known as Haiti's double debt, in which at one point as much as 80% of Haiti's revenue went towards paying. It crushed Haiti's economy, cementing the nation's path to poverty and pushing it deeper into the debt trap. Although France lowered the independence debt to 90 million francs and Haiti eventually paid off the double debt, a New York Times investigation revealed that Haiti still ended up paying more than what was stipulated, a total of 112 million francs, which amounts to $560 million today. But the exploitation didn't stop there. With pressure from Wall Street and what would become Citigroup in particular, the U.S. launched an operation to loot Haiti's gold reserves. In 1914, U.S. Marines seized $500,000 in gold from Haiti's National Bank, about $16 million in purchasing power today. It set the stage for the U.S. occupation of Haiti, which lasted 19 years. During this period, the U.S. further exacerbated the country's debt burden, forcing it to take on loans from Wall Street.
And this has really set the stage for a lack of development, a lack of resource for the needs of people in Haiti. And there are many in the country that draw direct lines between that colonial debt and the current socioeconomic status in Haiti right now, which is very low and has high levels of poverty and inequality and conflict.
As of 2021, Haiti's public debt totaled about $5 billion, or nearly 30% of its GDP. Which brings us to the second wave of colonialism. It no longer involved shipping enslaved people from Africa across the Atlantic, but setting up shop at the source. It began during the 19th century in what's called the Scramble for Africa, which was driven by Europe's Industrial Revolution and the changing demands of imperial European powers. European factories now needed rubber, palm oil, timber, tin, copper, cobalt, and other minerals, most of which weren't available from the slave economies in the Americas, yet plentiful in Africa. So Britain, France, Portugal, Germany, Belgium, and Spain, sliced up the continent, creating arbitrary borders and boundaries, grouping totally different ethnic groups and claiming large swaths of land for themselves. And these colonial powers exploited the resources of other countries to bolster their own economies. Notice a pattern? During this era, we see inherited colonial debt.
These are debts that colonial rulers had racked up in order to carry out their colonial project on certain countries. So to oppress people, to extract and plunder their wealth, and in some cases to enact mass murder on the populations. And some countries were forced to inherit these debts at the point of independence from colonial rulers, and they were forced to repay them.
This is what happened in the present-day Democratic Republic of Congo. In the 1880s, King Leopold of Belgium, known as the Butcher of the Congo, claimed the Congo as his personal property. Through extreme violence and forced labor, he exported vast quantities of ivory, rubber, and other natural resources, allowing him to amass over $1 billion in personal wealth between 1885 and 1908. But Leopold financed the plunder of the Congo with debt. That debt was later passed on to the Belgian government, which also took on loans to fund projects in the Congo after Leopold's rule. For example, by the 1950s, Belgium had borrowed $120 million from the World Bank, a U.S.-led lending institution. This loan funded the purchase of Belgian exported goods. Before the Congo gained independence in 1960, Belgium repaid more than 70% of that loan, around $88 million. However, the Congo inherited the outstanding balance of $32 million, or over $320 million today, adjusted for inflation. And so the debt cycle continued. Under the U.S.-backed dictatorship of Colonel Mobutu, Congo's public external debt skyrocketed to approximately $14 billion. Today, the Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the poorest countries in the world, with more than 90% of its population, over 60 million people, are estimated to be living on less than $2 a day. But that country isn't the only one dealing with inherited debt. Countries like Zimbabwe and Barbados also began their independence, weighed down by massive debt, which has had a lasting impact on their economies. So let's take a step back. The end of formal colonialism did not mark the end of exploitation. Instead, it marked the beginning of new debt cycles, independence debt and inherited debt. Ones designed to extract wealth and ensure lasting dependence on colonial powers.